Good afternoon, madam. Good afternoon. I'm Vishwanath here.
Welcome, sir. Is it audible to you?
Yeah, I think you have to slightly lift up your voice. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Shall we begin?
2 minutes, sir.
Okay. And you should permit me to share the screen.
Yeah. I'll give it. You have the option of sharing, sir.
Okay.
You can share your screen, sir.
1 second. I've just. Yes.
Are you able to share?
Yes. What about others? Can they see?
Visible.
Is it visible?
It's visible, sir.
Okay.
Okay, welcome back for the PG students for the one-day webinar for the student development. To give a brief welcome on this, sir, about the guest and the gathering, I request Ms. Rumana Tabassum, HOD of Management, to welcome the guest and the gathering of the today's student development program.
Good afternoon to one and all present. I, Ms. Rumana Tabassum, PG Coordinator, welcome you all on behalf of Department of PG to Online Student Development Program on theme, Use of Regression Techniques in Social Science Research. Regression analysis is a collection of statistical techniques that serves as a basis for drawing inferences about relationship among interrelated variables. Since these techniques are applicable in almost every field of the study, including the social, physical, biological, science, and business and engineering. Regression analysis now perhaps the most used of all data analysis method. So to give us an insight knowledge on this topic, we feel honored to have with us Dr. N.S. Vishwanath Sir, Honorary Dignitary Director General of Research. So to welcome and introduce our research person, now I request Professor Asima Madam, PG Coordinator, MA Economics and formal Vice Principal to welcome the resource person.
pleasant afternoon to one and all present here. Imagination is more important than knowledge. For knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating progress, giving birth to evolutions. It is strictly speaking a real factor in social science research. Honorable and distinguished dignitaries, respected members of management, dignified principal, dear colleagues, esteemed delegates, and invitees. It's a great honor and joy for me to welcome each one of you on this eventful occasion. At the outset, let me introduce and welcome the resource person of the day, Dr. N.S. Vishwanath, Honorary Director General of Research, Birla Institute of Management, Bangalore, deeply devoted to his duties. He has reached creative heights in the journey of intellectual empowerment. It is under his inspiring leadership that the Birla Institute of Management and also several other universities have focused beyond education into the realm of management and created world-class students, a truly collaborative leader, inspired every organization as an educationist. About his academic background and positions held and a few milestones he has achieved, highly appreciable and commendable. He had been and also presently an honorary Director General of Birla Institute of Management, Coordinator PG Department of Economics, Bangalore City University, Associate Professor, MICA Ahmedabad. He has, to his credit, 14 PhDs, 1/4 in different subjects. Master's degree in economics and statistics, and successfully guided 14 scholars of PhD, and 6 more are in progress. 23 years of PG teaching in management and 2 years in MA economics. Industry research experience for 21 years. Member of BOS, BOE of several universities. Referee for PhD fellow thesis. Reviewer of postdoctoral research projects. Courses taught at PG level, mathematical economics, quantitative techniques, research methodology, marketing, and management. Areas of research: marketing, finance, social marketing, training, and development. Consultant for the Karnataka Knowledge Commission. Area of interest: life literature and culture. Received a number of awards, honors, and certificates for best paper presentations, both from national and international institutions. Many research publications, for nearly 60 publications he has done. And editor-in-chief of various journals, both national and international. Organized many seminars, both national and international, of highest quality, order, and competence. Obtained second rank in agriculture, that is Masters in Agricultural Marketing Management from Mysore University. His leadership style is unique. We are highly inspired by your tremendous achievements, very inspiring, motivational, and outstanding. He succeeded immensely through his gentle nature and method of dealing with the people. I extend warm and respectful welcome to you, sir, on behalf of principal, management, PG coordinators, staff, and students. I heartily welcome Dr. Zahiruddin Ahmad Sahib, General Secretary, CMA, highly respected and honorable person of CMA, whose presence has graced this occasion. A leader has great qualities to attract. I repeat, a leader has great qualities to attract, unite, and lead. She is none other than our beloved principal, Professor Zubeda Begum, a magnetic personality widely known in university circle, role model of higher benchmark. I welcome you wholeheartedly, madam. At the same time, I wish to welcome the other eminent personalities of our college. Professor Sabiha Zubair, Vice Principal, Head of the Department of Urdu, highly accomplished personality. Dr. M.S. Vidya, Head of the Department of Kannada and IQAC Coordinator, a great literary Kannada literary figure. Dr. Sayyida Tabassum, Staff Secretary and dedicated HOD of Commerce. Professor Noor Aisha, HOD of Computer Science, who has extended all kinds of help to conduct this webinar. Professor Rumana, a coordinator MCOM, a dynamic teacher. Professor Mumtaz Begum, HOD of Hindi, very obedient and very fair lady of this college. And Professor Kokila, Department of Hindi. Dr. Afsari Jan, HOD of Geography. Dr. Asma Fatima, HOD of English. And all my dear colleagues and HODs of various departments. This program is graced by the presence of faculty delegates of various colleges and PG students, our own college and from outside colleges. I welcome them all with best wishes. I welcome each one of you individually. I hope this event will be more enlightening and cherishing. We look forward for this session for two great reasons. As the theme is the use of regression techniques in social science research. The first reason why this seminar will help our students is it will help the students to have an understanding of the fundamentals of research, and it will help them to understand about the planning of research and the use of tools to prepare the research projects. All the best. Thank you. Now I request the Honorable Speaker, Dr. N.S. Vishwanath Sir, to unfold his thoughts for the sake of the knowledge of our students. Thank you, sir. I welcome you.
Thank you. Can I begin?
Yes, sir.
You can record this and send it to people whom they require later.
Sir, it's live on YouTube.
Okay, it's live on YouTube. Very good, madam. I thank all the authorities and professor who introduced me in words and appreciation. The theme that has been given to me is regression methods in social sciences research. One of the most widely abused techniques is regression methods in research. Reason being that any research finding must have a backup of relationships established empirically. And given the empiricism that is there in vogue, people claim that relationship has been established using numbers. And that's why many conflicting results come out because of abuse of tools and techniques. The purpose of this session is to give some idea about the way techniques have got to be first used. Two, to understand the limitations of the tools and techniques and make appropriate interpretations from the numbers that we derive or crunch the numbers that we do as a part of analysis and use those crunch numbers for implications. Ultimately, what matters is the way we make a choice of tools and techniques and use those tools and techniques for drawing appropriate conclusions. When I need to give some background, and based on the background, I'll just move on to regression techniques. There are many umpteen number of techniques, but I choose only this mainly because that's a theme on which I've been advised to address. Given this, what research is all about? Research is all about learning the way to solve a problem of research of interest. And the interest itself is the problem. So once you mark out a problem as researchable and requires a solution, that problem will lead to its design and will lead to solution. But as the search process, how to search for a problem? First that comes to our mind is, why is it so? And we always think of describing it and finally end up in, how is it so? We describe as to how this has happened rather than going into the basic question of why. But curiosity always remains. So from curiosity, questions emerge. From questions, you find perhaps umpteen number of questions. You find a few questions are the questions that remain unanswered. They form the theme. The researchability of the theme has got to be established by appropriate knowledge that we acquire or updating our knowledge, and then move towards identifying the problem or writing the problem statement. There are some problems which people dwell upon in different aspects of social sciences: economics, sociology, history, psychology, etc. I'll just come out with all those and then move towards the tools and techniques. For example, one problem could be production methods and its efficiency. Another problem could be on product basis and economic efficiency. Third could be pricing methods for equity effects, free markets and equitability. Is there do we have free markets first? If there is a free market, can we achieve equitability using the free market is the question. Costs, prices and profits, how are they related? Perhaps these are some questions that need to be addressed. Some topics in the area of commerce and macro management, tax cuts and current account deficits. What are its implications? Social capital and NPO management could be another area. Social capital development, long-term effects on growth. Investment allocation for high reach. It's a planning exercise. Public-private partnership model of growth and development, some exercises. These are all macroeconomic and macro management topics of interest. Some problems, for example, in political science, democracy and leadership, an analysis of institutions, how institutions support the style of government, process of government, and the process of governance itself. How it produces leaders is another area of interest. Isms and governance. Can isms become the foundation of governance is the basic question, still being unanswered. It's being still, a solution is being searched for. We need to have a critical outlook at isms and governance. Linguistic states and cohesion for a unified policy. This is connected with our context, India. Movements for change of governance. Some critical analysis connected with movements for change of governance based on post-independent Indian history, post-independent histories as well, countries, etc. Religion and governance, basis and structural outlook. How much of religion do we need in governance is the basic question, still not answered. Another set of problems that we have is in the history. Historical setting during Karl Marx's period. What's this? What kind of setting it was that led to Karl Marx's contribution, perhaps seminal contribution, Das Kapital? Rule effects and harmony. What kind of rules should we have that leads to harmony? We're not still clear about that. Success of capitalism and depression in history. History before and after independence. This can apply to any country, any context. Culture through history and heritage. What are those elements of culture that can be drawn or extracted from history and heritage? Perhaps these are some topics, problems that are still being investigated in history. There's some problems connected with sociology as a part of social science. Gender and poverty effects. Is there any distinction or are there any differences between genders versus poverty effects? Economic empowerment and gender happiness. Women's success and family life. What is that family life that leads to success of women? Occupation and gender effects on success of society. Culture and society. This is a very seminal theme connected with anthropological issues in society. There are some problems connected with rural development. In India, after independence, a lot of efforts have been made and lots of money has been poured in the area of rural development. There are some themes that have come out. Changes in rural incomes and acquisition of wealth. Spatial distribution of poverty and development efforts. Handicrafts and wealth creation for growth. Rural divide, a study on filters. These are some of the topics connected with rural development. Curiosity. What is the curiosity all about? Curiosity refers to search for questions which people project and talk about or task about. Ask questions on which answers are not easy to obtain. Penetrate on some unanswered and partly answered questions. We get into that area of curiosity where solutions also not to be sought. Zero in on those questions under theoretical framework. Some questions you find some answers are available but not complete. For example, some theoretical framework is very much there, but under a set of assumptions. Suppose we relax those assumptions. How could things change is the question. Some area of incompleteness or part of outlook emerge. Assess researchability of that question, then work on the themes. Based on researchability and relevance, perhaps any research work should have its relevance towards its applicability. Otherwise, it's going to be conceptual research, which will have longer implications, later implications. But more important now is to answer the basic question, how relevant your research is, or its a topic is, for the current situation. Given this basic question, we have to work on the problem statements. I just brief about what these are. It's just a statement written in about 500 to 1,000 words, a thumb rule based on theory, based on review of studies. You find problem of research just can be extracted. We have to do what is known as meta-analysis and statistics. Do the meta-analysis based on past studies and findings of the past studies, leading to areas covered so far, and that leads to areas to be uncovered or research gap. Given this research gap, you will be in a position to get into the area of research in which you would like to prioritize depending on situations and then work on. Use jargons, we always say this, use jargons, phrases, and the rigorous language of research. Ultimately, language is a subtle instrument. We need to use language in the way in which it is used in the context of research. Ensure continuity of the previous write-up or previously study done. What I mean to say again here is, review of literature is going to be the foundation that marks research gap. And the meta-analysis is a tool that provides you, based on identification of size effect variables, the themes that are covered sufficiently, appropriate extraction has been done in terms of findings, and then the gaps that emerge. Ultimately, the gap that emerges will lead us to marking out research themes. Given this background of problem statement, now that assume that we have no problem on hand, you list out objectives of analysis to be written in this particular format: to identify, to analyze, to investigate, to learn, to search for, to elucidate, so on. When you list out objectives, you'll be in a position to state some hypothesis, where hypothesis testing will lead us to possible answers or plausible answers to questions that we have as research questions. Link up the hypothesis that you have stated to objectives and to the problem statement and to the theme of research in terms of the title that you have. Ultimately, stating a hypothesis is equally important. To design a method, and that design will give you or will lead you to solutions. It depends on the type of research. Is it conceptual or applied or descriptive or analytical or exploratory or otherwise? There are many types of research, and most of the time we always move towards two categories of research. One is conceptual research, the other one is applicational research. And any study that is done as a part of application will have a lot of implications for society. We say these things: define universe of study, area of study, population, sampling method, operational definitions, identify variables and attributes. This is important for us. Then structure conceptual equations based on theme of research, put that in a mathematical format or in the form of models and constructs. Ultimately, a theoretical construct needs to be developed as a part of your original contribution. Search for this important: proxy, dummy, or intervening variables or moderating variables. Perhaps all kinds of variables that we can think of in terms of variables that can be measured, variables that cannot be measured. Variables that can be measured are exact variables. Variables that cannot be measured are known as proxy or dummy variables. It depends on how we use them and categorize them. Categorical variables are the ones wherein we have to develop a scale for measuring the values of those variables. Then again, go back to your hypothesis. Either mathematically formulate those hypotheses and construct some hypotheses wherever necessary, or move towards redefining your hypothesis in exact mathematical terms. Then move towards collection of data wherever necessary. I mark out those things where data are not available, and then collect data sets. And collection of data sets requires a long process of instrument development. Use the data for analysis. It's here our regression techniques come up. It's here two-way or multi-way analysis will have to be done. Factor analysis will have to be done. These are some tools which I have just highlighted. There are umpteen numbers of tools: cluster analysis, discriminant analysis, indexes or index number analysis, harmonic or spectral analysis, co-integration analysis with reference to time series data sets that we have or temporal data sets we have, response analysis, error analysis, entropy analysis, which we have drawn from physics, and finally, integration analysis, which refers to integrating the results for the final conclusions. Given this, the most important, all others are also equally important. The most important and the theme of research for us is regression methods. I'll dwell upon this in another next 20 minutes or 25 minutes, and then finally sum up my session. When we talk of regression methods, regression refers to that relationship which can be quantified irrespective of whether the variables are quantifiable or not. Any regression equation is based on the hypothesis that we have set, and the hypothesis that we have set goes back to the problem statement that we have enumerated. Given this, in the conceptual equations, we mark out those equations we consider as having definite relationships and not definite relationships leading to testing of hypothesis. Now, in a regression equation, there will be a dependent variable on the right-hand side of the equation, and a dependent variable on the left-hand side of the equation, and an independent variable on the right-hand side of the equation. So the dependent variable, which is also called an explanatory variable or a regressant, is a function of an independent variable on the right-hand side of the equation, which is also called a predictor variable or a response variable. Perhaps there are several terminologies used for dependent variables and several terminologies used for response variables or explanatory variables. These terminologies are very well known, but most important thing is there is a relationship that we need to establish. Given this relationship, the question that comes on the form of relationships, whether the form of relationship is linear or form of relationship is non-linear. Take the context of an institution, say an organization doing their business. Since it's a profit-oriented organization, it has got its own formal setup. Given the formal setup, there's a hierarchy, and given the institution, it is connected with its business purchase of inputs and sales of output or outputs that it does to meet its customer or end user requirements. Given this institution, which has got a linkage in terms of supply chain of inputs, throughput, output, and outcome. This is the paradigm of research. Input, throughput, output, and outcome. Given this paradigm of research, you will find regression equations will help us through conceptual equations. Now, the format here, or the form of relationship here in our organizational setting is normally linear. Reason being, an organization consists of what is known as a set of rules, a set of procedures, a set of practices, set of best practices, set of next practices, and so on. All the practices associated with that organization which is running business will have its effect in terms of the way it's functioning. And an institution also consists of money, men, materials. Given these 3 M's, you find a blend of these are there to follow the procedural practices or to distort practices given the situation that may arise from time to time. What I mean to say here is, given a set of rules and regulations, some situations may emerge wherein it's not possible for us to follow the same set of rules and regulations because we are into meeting our targets. Could be business targets, could be income targets, could be revenue targets, could be minimizing cost targets, optimizing profitability, etc. All these are the variables that we can think of as a part of our regression equation. Now, what's the functional relationship between inputs and outputs is one basic question with the business organization. What is that financial relationship between the revenue flow and the cost flow in terms of streams of flows it has? It's to be examined. On the other side, the end users, they demand those products, they take those products, and the demand could fluctuate for reasons beyond the control of the organization or for reasons outside the organization. in which case our conceptual equations will have to be different, and we need to use a regression technique here to examine whether the organization is going according to the set rules, procedures, and practices within the organization and outside the organization too. So an organization can be divided into in-house, endogenous setup, and an exogenous setup, wherein the factors outside the organization operates to distort the inner equations. Now, simple regression model of linear form is acceptable here, because we want to see whether that form of linear relationship between input and outputs, a form of relationship between sales and prices, form of relationship between revenues and costs, etc. have got to be linked up. It's here we always assume a linear form because we hypothesize that organization is performing according to well-set rules and practices, best practices, next practices, etc. You must understand here, linear format is that format where you find in a setting, it could be organization, it could be administrative setup, it could be a state, it could be a district, it could be any form of governance that you have, but still procedures and practices will always operate within that environment. In the case of governance, there'll be no sales as such, but there'll be always a product that governance delivers in terms of keeping law and order, in terms of making people reach their welfare status, etc. Simple regression methods will help us in the linear format. That means linear form is applicable where you find a formal setup is very much there in existence. There's an interesting background to this. If you conceptually think and make a set of assumptions that linear form exists, your hypothesis will be then whether that linear form is true with respect to men in terms of their operations, in terms of the capability to deliver, two, in terms of use of raw materials, inputs, in coming out with final set of outputs, or it could be in terms of the price, competition for pricing of the final products in the market, price discovery process, and the reflection of the value of the product per unit as a part of revenue are creating value for the organization. The value equation sets in here. Value equation has its roots in economics. Value equation has its roots in commerce, but the value equation also has its roots in terms of satisfying the end users. You see here different sets of value equations that need to be tested as a part of our understanding. Linear form of simple regression model will help us analyze all this. If there are distortions, those distortions are reflected by the tools and techniques that we have, regression tools and techniques that we have, and I'll explain some of those rules and some of the regression tools and techniques. And you can see there that the distortions are reflected in terms of the deviations from the formal setting that we have in a framework of work, in a framework of an organization. So non-linearity is also an aspect of what is known as living. Psychologically, if you look at some psychological aspects, we always say this. Linear model won't work because people are not straight. People are not straight. It's a fact. None of us are straight. But one thing is certain. Why do we behave that way? Why people behave in a curvilinear way? Simple. They're not straight. Assuming that they're straight, we start working on how deviant they are in terms of meeting the requirements, meeting the inner urge, meeting their own products and services, etc. It's here linear models won't work. It's non-linear model, and setting a non-linear model format or a construct would work, and hypotheses can be generated on the basis of the non-linear formats or models that we have of the equations. It's here non-linear regression model is the best fit. For example, in agricultural production functions, we have what is known as Cobb-Douglas production function, which is a log linear production function derived theoretically by the two scientists in the initial stages, Cobb and Douglas. That's why it's named after them. This log-log model is a typical Cobb-Douglas production function which captures the curvature of a nonlinear behavior. And most important thing, the rate of change can be captured here. For example, if you have a semi-log model, we talk of growth rates, estimating growth rates. Semilog model is the most appropriate model for estimating growth rates. We know that arithmetical model overestimates growth rates, harmonic model underestimates growth rates, whereas geometric model perfectly estimates growth rates. And a semilog model is a geometric model associated with projection, forecasting of the growth rates or estimation of growth rates. Again, the model comes in here, the construct comes in here, and the regression of the relationship between inputs and outputs will fall in here, or relationship between a set of independent variables influencing the dependent variable also falls in. Ultimately, semi-log model, log-log models, and several such formats, including trigonometric models, all those such models are applicable and are being used in research. There's another area which is called multiple regression. This multiple regression, the earlier two, what I explained is the form, linear, nonlinear, and the use of nonlinear regression, etc. This is with reference to one independent variable influencing one dependent variable. But the reality of the world is that there are several variables influencing one dependent variable. Now, given that several independent variables influence one dependent variable, or several predictor variables influence one regressant, the relationship between the regressant and regressors have got to be established. This is done by an extension of the regression method from simple linear to nonlinear to what is known as multilinear regression. In multilinear regression, we will have one dependent and several independent variables. See, this is the relationship wherein we try to understand the influence of several independent variables independently influencing the dependent variable. The question comes, given the multiple regression model, what can we think of the relationship? What can we find out on the influence of independent variables on the dependent variable? Out of 10 independent variables, are 5 influencing the dependent variable, 8 influencing the dependent variable, are all influencing the dependent variable? This question we need to answer. There's a possibility that out of 10 independent variables theoretically influencing all that, intuitionally influencing all these variables influencing the dependent variable, there's a possibility that 1 out of 10 might be significant enough. Others may not be that significant. It's here the problem of testing hypothesis comes in. And multiple regression techniques will help us, one, to develop or construct a model on the basis of theoretical knowledge. What's important for us is to have theoretical knowledge of the subject on which we are doing research. It could be economics, it could be commerce, it could be management, it could be social sciences, which includes psychology, sociology, history, and so on. Perhaps all dimensions of social sciences that we have, they use multiple regression techniques based on the theoretical foundations and the theoretical updating done in that particular area. Ultimately, the knowledge of the subject on which we are doing research becomes important. If you have an updated knowledge of the subject, questions still remain. And yet, if you want to answer those questions, all questions need not be research questions. Only 1 or 2 could be research questions. In which case, you have to extract that researchability of those questions, which are considered seminal, worth doing research, and establish researchability on the basis of its relevance to theory, relevance to practice. On most occasions, we do both. We construct a model, we make a new theoretical construct based on the theoretical setting, and then move towards a new theory that we want to develop on the basis of the results. Ultimately, results help the society, the organizations, and the new theoretical construct that we develop on the basis of results of the study will help modify the theory and help improve the knowledge in terms of upgrading the knowledge of the theory that we are researching on. Now, multiple regression model is one such model which helps us. There is one more. People will ask a question, economics especially, and in management both. They ask us a question. You talk of only relationship between dependent and a set of independent variables. Why not there be a set of dependent variables and a set of independent variables, and another set of interdependent variables. I've not got into my PPTs here. That's a little complicated area that requires a lot of time for me to explain, but I'd like to explain in brief what are those relationship between a set of dependent variables, a set of independent variables, and a set of interdependent variables. The real problem comes in when complexities arise with reference to relationships. Relationships are not linear in this case. Relationships are non-linear in this case. And this relationship is non-linear and complex. You see the complexity associated with set of independent variables, set of interdependent variables, moving towards establishing a relation between a set of dependent variables. That means you have a matrix of dependent variables, a matrix of independent variables, and another matrix of interdependent variables. This is quite common, and this relationship is quite common in the area of economics and management. However, there are some peculiarities associated with the behavior of variables. What are variables? Variables are the ones which change, for example, at one point of time or over time period. Sometimes both is possible. Given this nature of variables, we divide variables generally into one, quantifiable variables, and two, qualifiable variables. All quantifiable variables are easily measurable by standard units of measurement, whereas qualifying variables are not easily measurable. Earlier, some 50 years ago, people used to say this is an attribute. So given the attribute, they used to develop scenarios. Even now, scenario development is there in management area. But most important is the way we look at measuring these attributes. Ultimately, we are getting into what is known as measurement problems we have in economics, in management, in psychology, in sociology, etc. Important thing is measurement. Measurement of attributes or qualitative variables requires development of a scale, and that scale is on a number system, well-defined number system, and the responses of the target group on the scale gives us the efficacy and the results that we expect out of the behavior. For example, all behavioral variables cannot be quantified. Where we have attributes or qualitative variables, you have to measure it. For example, attitude, you have to measure. Values, you have to measure. Behavior, you have to measure. Behavioral aspects, there are several behavioral aspects leading to several behavioral variables. You have to measure all that on a scale. Now, the scale that you choose, or the choice of that scale, is critically important in capturing the effects of these variables. I'll show you an example where I've drawn and the relationships and way it has been analyzed here. You must note here that when a dependent variable is an attribute or a qualifying variable or a quality variable, and all independent variables are quantifiable variables. For example, our dependent variable is agenda or occupation. Okay, you find on the right-hand side all quantifying variables. When you have this kind of relationship, we use logistic regression. Logistic regression is used when the dependent variable is qualitative variable, set of variables, and the independent variables influencing these dependent variables are quantitative variables. There's a possibility that both dependent and independent variables could be qualifying variables or qualitative variables, in which case we use logit and probit regression. Means now umpteen number of tools are available, but the way we understand those tools under the assumption under which these tools are developed indicate to us very clearly the way we need to measure its significance, its effects, its forecasting, everything. Everything is possible now in terms of numbers. Logistic regression is an advanced version of nonlinear regression or advanced version of multiple regression. We call it, this logistic regression techniques is called generalized linear regression technique or generalized regression technique, wherein logit and probit regressions are frequently used. Interesting part, I'd like to show an example. This is based on latest work that we have done, we're still doing. And this relationship is between annual income and response variables. And annual income, if you take each annual income, each respondent, it's in exact terms, it becomes a quantitative variable. If you take income groups, each group qualified as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, say 5 groups, it becomes a qualitative variable wherein one represents a particular group, second represents another higher level group, third, etc., up to 5, the highest level group, so on. Now, I have a set of results connected with annual income of the respondent, and we have regressed the benefits for people, common users of the Ayushman Bharat scheme. Okay, we have identified in all 57 response variables connected with Ayushman Bharat scheme for the end user benefits. You know, Ayushman Bharat scheme was envisaged by Government of India 2 years ago, two and a half years ago, and this scheme is in operation now. And the purpose of this research is to examine the Ayushman Bharat scheme under coverage, linkage, and transmission to see how much of coverage of Ayushman Bharat scheme has been arrived at, what kind of linkage is established between scheme, governmental institutions, and the hospitals, private and public institutions, the end user, and also link up the transmission effects in terms of linking up the flow of money as well as the benefits under scheme to reach end users. For this, we developed a linear model because the scheme has set track of flow of money for a particular purpose. The purpose is that end users should get health welfare benefits under a scheme at less cost, better quality treatment, both in private and in government hospitals. This is across the entire country. This scheme is across the entire country, which means the hierarchy of linking of institutions from government to private public institutions to private institutions to end user requirements. All these are linked up here. So it's in this context, a set of coverage variables have been identified, a set of transmission variables have been identified, and a set of linkage variables have been identified, because all these three are critically important for us. Now, given this, we have got a regression result wherein linear model relationship have been examined with reference to income as a function of 57 response variables. And these are the results that we have come out as a model summary. One, it gives, I've used SPSS 25 and got the results. We get R, multiple correlation between dependent variable and all independent variables. 2, R square, the power of predictability of the equation is determined by coefficient of determination. It examines the power of predictability, and the R square gives us, it's known as coefficient of determination. It always lies between 0 and 1. In case it is less than 0, it means the power of predictability is not there. If it is less than 0 or 0, no power of predictability. If it is 1, there's perfect predictability. But normally, R square lies between 0 and 1. Now, this result also we have got. Then we have what is known as adjusted R square. This is an important measure to measure the effects of what is known as redundant variables. Out of 57 variables in this equation here, which I'm going to show the results, some 20 variables could be more influencing annual income. Other 27 variables may not be influencing. But econometricians have found that if you go on adding independent variables on the right-hand side of the equation, the value of R square increases. And even if the variables on the right-hand side, when you go on adding, when they're redundant, still the value of R square move up, which is incorrect in terms of determining the power of predictability. So a new measure was developed. Instead of R square, we have developed what is known as adjusted R square, which is coefficient of determination adjusted for redundant variables on the right-hand side of the equation. There's another measure that has come out, is known as standard error estimate. This standard error estimate is that value of the sample which is relatively closer to true value. How closer it is to to true value is estimated by standard of estimate. If the standard of estimate is less, closer to 0, we say it's the sample estimates are closer to the true value of the population parameter. If it is not so, then we say it is standard is high, the predictability is also low. This change statistics is the one that comes out, and this change statistics is the one that gives us an idea about the way the power of predictability R square changes when you add variables on the right hand side of the equation. Okay. Next is on F statistic. This F statistic is that statistic which gives us the relationship across all variables tested together at once. It's by a tool known as analysis of variance, ANOVA. And degrees of freedom refers to degrees of freedom exercised by the predictor variable and the residual variable. Significance F refers to that value of type 1 error that it computes based on the sample observations. There's one statistic which is very important. It's known as double method statistic. This is DW statistic, measures the degree of autocorrelation of the errors or the residual terms. If the residual terms are autocorrelated, either for a point of time data or for time series data, you find DW gives us a clear idea. Any value of DW closer to 2 or exact 2, we say if it is exact 2, no autocorrelation. If it is closer to 2, we say it's okay, acceptable. If it is beyond 2, below 2, we say autocorrelation presents. There are some implications of autocorrelation. We'll not worry about that. Now I'm giving you the results that we obtained for annual income as a function of 57 response variables. You can see the output has you can see on the screen for model 1, it's a fixed effects model called, it assumes all the constants are not variables, and it's a fixed effect. It's based on certain assumptions. Given these assumptions, you find that it has given the value of R, which is multiple correlation coefficient. It says it is 0.395 between annual income of the respondent and the 57 responses all these people have given. Our sample size was 405, small n was 405. Given this, it is 0.395, which means there's a strong multiple correlation. 0.395 is a good score in terms of multiple correlation between set of 57 response variables and one dependent variable, which is annual income. R square, which is power of predictability, is 0.156. The power of predictability of this multiple regression equation is 15.6%. And the adjusted R square has a positive value, which is 0.018. And the power of predictability is 1.8. Since it's positive, there's a definite level of predictability. So what we do is, when adjusted R square is this, we identify those variables using the coefficient results of the coefficients, and then move towards another exploration. Most of the time we do forward regression, adding one variable at a time on the right hand side, or backward regression, wherein we examine entire 57 variables with one and then slowly reduce it to 56, 55, etc., and see where R square stabilizes. That value of R square which stabilizes, we call it perfect equation with reference to the data set. You can see here, adjusted R square value is there, standard error estimate is there, which is 1.431. Now, we have collected this data on a Likert scale. Given the Likert scale data that we have, which is a 5-point Likert scale, you find the standard estimate at 1.431 is high. So it means there is some problem connected with the stability of the sample parameters. However, this is still okay because it gives us clear idea about which factors or which variables on the right hand side influences annual income. F change here is 1.127. Value of F, if it's more than 1, we say that the linear model is acceptable. So otherwise, we say the linear model is a perfect fit if it's more than 1. If it's less than 1, we say there's some problem with the compatibility of the model. We try for nonlinear models then. So F value determines whether the relationship is linear or not. Given the F value, can I take another 5 minutes, madam? Hello? Hello? Can I take another 2-3 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You can see these R square change in terms of adding equations leading to change of value of R, etc. Degrees of freedom refers to that measure wherein it is the power of degrees of freedom with reference to the numerator variable as well as denominator variable. And Debin-Mason statistics is there as 2.023. You can see, which means it has no autocorrelation. Similarly, the ANOVA table, which has got f at p value, which is alpha value at 0.258, enables us to accept null hypothesis of no relationship between annual income and the 57 variables that we have. So statistically and empirically, we say there's no relationship between annual income and the response variables, 57 response variables with reference to Eichmann-Bhatt scheme, which means theoretically relationship may exist, but here it means there's some positive aspects of coverage, linkage, and transmission of Eichmann-Bhatt scheme with reference to not considering income of the respondent, but more considering about the patient. In hospitals, patient first is the technique, is the first strategy, and that's being appropriately followed. Similarly, we get another output called coefficients output. These coefficients are given here, and all the coefficients will give us an idea about which factor influences the most. For example, in this case, you can see here, it gives unstandardized coefficients, then standard error, standardized coefficients, and t-statistic significance value. If you fixing of alpha is the priority of the researcher. If I fix alpha is 0.15 for psychological variables, first value, which is a base, is statistically significant. Second one is not significant. Third one is not significant. Fourth value is significant, which means it strongly influences income, etc., etc. Likewise, we can find out which of the variables out of 57 strongly influences, which are not influencing based on the value of t-statistic and the p-value. You can see here, all the 57 values are available. And this is what we do as a part of using regression techniques. In the case of nonlinear model, the descriptions are given here as to what we should do. I said when f value is less than 1, go in for a log linear model. And we go in for normally log-log model, or semi-log model, or trigonometric models, etc. And whenever there is a problem of responses of the type of variables, we choose logistic regression. It could be a binary response, it could be a multinomial response, it could be income range response, etc. as qualifying variables. For example, number of days in a hospital is a Poisson variable. Okay. Likewise, we identify all that as a part of use of logistic regression. Ultimately, this regression, logistic regression, is based on certain assumptions. It assumes that variables are binary or multi-response as an attribute. All observations are independent. That's important here. There's no multicollinearity between independent variables. When there's correlation between independent variables themselves, then we say there's problem multicollinearity. We assume there is no multicollinearity. There are no extreme outliers. Important when you have data, extreme outliers you have to remove by outlier tests. There are outlier statistical tests. The linear relation between explanatory and response variables is an assumption. The sample size must be sufficiently large. How large? The largeness of sample size is determined by KMO statistic, which gives us sampling adequacy. If KMO statistics is more than 0.5 and closer to 1, we say sample size is adequate. If KMO statistic is less than 0.5, we say sample size is not adequate, collect some more data, some more respondents, some more units, enumerate some more units, we say. So these are the assumptions on which that is based. This is the type of the model that we have. And we need to list out limitations and finally move towards references and come out with your research findings. I think with this, I'd like to stop at this point in time. I know I have to go a little fast towards the end. Any questions? I'd like to take questions in just 1 or 2 minutes. Just 1 minute, please hold on. Any questions? Any questions? Can I wind up, madam?
Thank you, sir, for sparing your valuable time despite of your busy schedule. Thank you so much for sharing the thoughtful information.
I'm happy that it's available on my speech is available on the live, in the YouTube. But more important, I would like to say is that these PPTs are available with me. I'll be sending it to Professor Asima Parveen. I have got her email ID. Others can also use this. Okay, and I thank all of you, right from Professor Asima to even Rekha Jagannath, the person who introduced me to Asima, and I know Asima, I knew her, but somehow she became the link here. I thank Rekha Jagannath also for this, in this occasion. On this occasion, I thank all of you for patient hearing, and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Participants, do you have any doubts? If you have any, you can raise your hands. Okay, so there's no doubt from your end. Now I call upon Ms. Hajira Sultana, lecturer in Commerce Department, to propose vote of thanks. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. I, Hajira Sultana, lecturer of Department of Commerce and Management, on behalf of whole fraternity of Abbas Khan Degree College, take this opportunity to thank the resource person, Dr. N.S. Vishwanatha. Thank you, sir, for your enlightening speech. The session was very informative. With a deep sense of gratitude, I would like to thank our principal, Professor Zubeda Begum, being the catalyst that inspired us to do our best. Thank you, ma'am. My sincere thanks to Dr. M.S. Vidya, IQAC coordinator, for her constant support and guidance. I also wish to express my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Saida Tabassum, Staff Secretary, HOD of Commerce. I would like to thank Ms. Noor Aisha, IQAC Deputy Coordinator, HOD of Computer Science, for her coordination and contribution for the success of this event. Thank you, ma'am. I would like to thank Ms. Rumana Tabassum, PG Coordinator, HOD of Management, for planning this productive event. I also thank Professor Asima Parveen, HOD of Economics and PG Coordinator, Professor Mumtaz Begum, HOD of Hindi, for their valuable presence. Last but not the least, I thank all the participants for making today's event a success. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Shall I leave this right? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.